Good morning. Welcome online. This morning we're doing something a little different than we've done in the past sometimes, and rather than having a message, it's going to be a forum on the family. So we're looking forward to it, and hope it's going to be helpful to you listeners as well. We have Ben and Lisa Wall, Kornelsen and Angie Wiebe, and I'll let them introduce themselves briefly, who they are, their family, so you know where they're coming from. So Carlos, why don't you start?
Yeah, so I'm Carlos. We have 5 kids. We have the oldest is 12. She's our oldest daughter, and we have a 10-year-old boy, almost 10. Shouldn't jump to conclusions yet. 7-year-old daughter, 5-year-old daughter, and our youngest just turned 1 yesterday. So it's an exciting life, full of energy all the time.
Yeah, so I am Ben.
I'm Lisa.
And we have 4 boys, ages 16, 15, 12, and 9. And the same thing. We have boys with a lot of energy all the time.
Very good, very good. Okay, so I'll be asking you some questions, and you can just all respond to it as you would like. These are questions that I think are relevant for our day, especially thinking of the media, of the screen time, technology world that we're in, that was not there when I was young. And you're all at that age where you remember when it was not like this, and young enough to have kids who are in it, or who would potentially be in it. So the first question I'd like to ask is, what are some of the biggest changes that have come about in your lifetime that has made raising the family more difficult?
Okay, well, yeah, I guess we would be the first generation that got thrown into this boat with technology. So I'm not sure how to navigate this properly, whether we'll do it right or wrong. I guess the next generation will be able to tell that. But I would say that would definitely be one of the things that is more challenging now than when we were growing up, is that the screens, obviously, you have to figure out how to properly do that, and motivate them to become creative outside of the screens, because the screens definitely want to take up all the time.
Mm-hmm. One of the ways that I would phrase it for us is, when I was a kid, I had things that I wished I had that I didn't have, that I was going after, or that I hope to achieve someday, or hope to be able to experience someday. None of that came at me through the internet or a device that I constantly carried with me. So the amount of pressure I took on from that compared to the amount of pressure that I can see kids take on now, or that I take in now, it's a different world now. There's a lot more to measure ourselves up to now than there was when we were young.
A book I read quite a while ago was talking about how even just going to the store to buy a pack of gum is stressful now. You can't just go and, I want, strawberry flavor and pick there's 20 different kinds and 50 different flavors. And I mean, if picking a pack of gum is that stressful, think about how stressful it is just to walk through everyday life and have every tiny bit of information in the world in your pocket 24/7. It really is an incredibly different world for our kids now. Yeah.
Very much so. Anyone else? Okay. I remember, I value when I go to third world countries and I see families that are in a totally different lifestyle. They might live in a straw hut. Kids play with mud. They're creative with things that we would never think of. And here we are thinking we have to have screen time, we have to have this, we have to have that, we have to have an iPhone. And if I don't have it, then something is abnormal. And I think we need to realize that we make normal what we choose to make normal. People who don't have that option don't think they need that. And so for us to think that we need all that is not necessarily the truth. It might be something that we would love, like you were saying, Carlos, but not necessarily that we need. So another question would be, how can we make technology a benefit to the family or raising the family in our day today?
All right. Well, I guess a benefit in technology is that you can definitely do a bit of education on there, and we have to be creative in doing that in a fashionable time limit, and because that's the world we're living in and we're going into, and just teach them how to go to do this properly, because that is somewhat the future is technology, where you do a lot of it at work, you do a lot of it in school by now as well. There's most of it is electronic as well. So though there is definitely ways of doing that you can do it in a positive way.
I would totally agree with that. There's so much we can learn. Like, any one of us can be an expert on whatever we want to be an expert on, because we can go get the information. We have to sift through it, so it's a tool. I'd say it's like almost any other resource. It's like almost any other substance, even if we want to call it that. To have access to any information is fantastic, just like having access to cash is fantastic. But it may not be great. We can use it how we want to use it. And so being able to connect with our friends, with groups when we need to go through stuff, when we just want to go have a ton of fun, or listen to great music, or great movies or shows. There's so many good ways. And like you said, there's a lot of work that can be done. Technology is fantastic. It's our responsibility with it. That's the question.
So would it be safe to say then that we need more character development now than we did 50 years ago to know how to use this and to make it a positive thing? It takes a lot more self-control, which you didn't need back then in this area. For example, if you want to watch porn, you can do that now. That wasn't readily available when I was young. And so it takes a lot more self-control, so we have to build character. And I think if we don't build character along with technology, we'll lose. And I think for us to really keep that in mind, that building character and strong values is absolutely very important. So let me ask you another question. How do you control this media in your house?
Well, our kids are still fairly young. Like, our oldest is only 12, and we homeschool, so there's some protection there. But something we talked about this week was that I think because of the media world we live in and the easy access that there is, I mean, even with our kids being homeschooled, they could go to a friend's house and see something on a computer at a friend's house. I mean, it's bound to happen, really. It's not a matter of if, it's when, right? So I think something that we were talking about this week was that we need to have conversations with our kids that we don't want to have.
Yeah.
And we need to have those conversations extremely early. I've already talked to my kids about porn, even the little ones. And have I said the word porn? I don't know. Yeah, I think I actually have. There's going to be images on the computer that you shouldn't be seeing. If there's something on the computer that you see that makes you uncomfortable, you can totally come to mommy and daddy and tell us. This is going to happen. You're going to see stuff out there. I mean, you drive around the city, you're going to see pictures that you shouldn't be seeing. It needs to be a part of our conversations with our kids from very little.
Right.
If we're scared to have those conversations, then we shouldn't be having kids, really. I mean, in this day and age, you have to have those conversations because the kids are going to come across it. It's going to happen. We have to be brave if we're going to be parenting now. We have to be, for our kids' sake and for our own sake. And if you have a 15-year-old and you think they've never seen anything, you're wrong. Almost guaranteed, you're wrong. Yeah, you have to start early. You have to start early. Not just the simple birds and bees, this is how babies are made. You have to have the conversations about all of the spectrum. Are you scared about what your kids are going to believe, what your kids are going to become, or all of these agendas that we hear about? I'm not scared of that stuff for my kids. Not because I don't think they're going to come across it, because I'm going to shelter them, but because they're already going to know about it. And they're going to know where we stand, and they're going to have their own conviction. Not that we're forcing it on them, but they need to understand the world that they are living in, and they need to understand the world, or who God made them to be. Yeah. So
Right.
we can't be afraid of that stuff.
And also, it's not only the porn side but it's also the faith. You can listen to 1,000 messages that influence them. Like we have voices coming from every direction, thousands of them, and there are people who are losing their faith now that you would have thought were strong people. But because of the influence from every side, they often pick up on something and say, oh, this is interesting, let me go into it. And eventually, yeah, that sounds reasonable. And it's not the word guiding us, it's influence. And so that's a very dangerous place if we don't recognize that even as adults.
Yeah, like Angela said, it's a lot of talking to our kids about a lot of things that we don't want to talk about. We have a 16-year-old and a 15-year-old, right? And we've made a lot of mistakes with this technology coming out so early in our lives, right? And we kind of just handed it to them. And I find that it's never too late to change. Like to change things, mistakes you made, and how easily they adapt to the changes you make. Even though they might think it's dumb right now or whatever, but I think in the future they will see our point of view. And like we have talked about, like it's us being united. I think the kids often are okay with things if they see that we agree on the decisions that we make in those areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I know early on, that was probably one of our biggest issues. Lisa here saw right through this right away, and I didn't come on board right away, and that has probably caused more pain in anything between us, and even between us and the kids. I have come on board. I've seen since the Lord has done some work in my heart. I praise God for that. And I would agree with that. If there's parents in the home, please be on the same team, have the same vision, move forward with that so that the kids can see that we are not divided, that we are in unity with this decision, and have a foundation to work on, because it's very important now more than ever, because they are being pulled from every direction. Mm-hmm. And they have to know at least what our heart is and what our foundation is, what our desires are.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think unity is very, very key. It makes you 10 times stronger. Absolutely. What do we see coming down the line in the next 10 years, for example, that we have to prepare for, or that we now already know that's going to be a challenge in a few years because it's already starting? Are there things like that you would like to point out, or that you've seen, or that you recognize that this is something we'll have to be watching out for? Like Angela was saying, we have to talk about things that we never used to have to talk. My parents never talked about these things. They didn't have to. They never talked about gay lifestyle. It was never an issue, never was a topic. Today it is. Small kids know about this stuff. And so now we have to talk about it. So it is a totally different world. And so what about the next 10 years? What do we see that has maybe already started or coming down the line that we will have to be prepared for? Anything that comes to mind?
I think work ethics. I think that is going to be a big thing, because it's so easy to just sit on the screen and do nothing. And it's much easier to just stay at home and
right.
Try to entertain yourself with things like that. And creativeness, right? Mm-hmm. And to be creative, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the other thing that I can see happening is socializing, because it's so easy to just communicate through the computers or the phones nowadays, and to physically get together and hang out is definitely going to get more challenging as we go on. And I think we need to be fairly deliberate about making it a point that we keep hanging out with people as the times get better and as we move forward.
In terms of challenges, I don't know how a person would define it, but we've come this far in 10 years. Often change is exponential, so if change continues at this pace, I don't know that we'll have anything figured out in terms of specific, how do we use technology, how do we use the next innovation. We'll have to be able to move and adapt to it. And so I think it'll be that values that you were talking about. If we know what our values are and we know what matters to us, we know what it means for me and Angela and our house to serve the Lord and to seek his kingdom. If we know that for ourselves and we can live that with our kids, then whatever curveballs continue to develop or opportunities develop, we can take advantage of them or control or manage them. I think it would come back down to that word responsibility again for me, because even now it's so easy I can just Google something. Why do I need to know anything? As AI becomes more and more developed and more intuitive and natural to use, will we continue to exercise our ability to think?
Yeah, we were briefly talking about this beforehand. I think Angela mentioned this. It's not the school that our kids go to. It's not the church that we go to. It's the home that we are that really will make or break our children. And that, like Proverbs 22:6, we know that verse says, train up a child the way he should go, and when he's old he will not depart from it. That's an interesting verse. But it gives you the implication that you set them on a course and they're not going to waver from it very much. And I think generally that is true, because some of the values that I've learned as a young child, they may not have been spoken verbally, but they were implied or lived. And they are still there. You generally know if you meet a person that is older, let's say you meet an 80-year-old person, they generally have a good, strong work ethic. It's just almost a given, because they grew up in a difficult time. And now if you talk to teenagers, they may or may not want to go to work. So it's a different mindset that we're seeing. What would you say would be some of the most difficult things to raise a family right now? Is it technology, or is it something else that makes it most difficult?
I feel like we really have to stand our ground, and exactly going back to the other question is look 10 years ahead. What things, hard things do we have to do now, no matter how hard it is? Like, because sometimes it's easy to just say, oh yeah, you can do this or that, and just to get out of it. But to stand firm on the things that you believe, whether it's hard or not. Like, even though the kids are mad or they don't agree with your decision that you make, but if you can see, when I make this decision 5 years from now, it'll be good. It will be worth it, no matter what you go through.
Let me throw you a little bit of curveball.
Okay.
Do you feel, or any one of you, do you always feel that you have to explain to your kids exactly why you're doing what you're doing, or is your word your word? If you say, for example, if you say we don't do screen time tonight, do you have to explain why, or is it because mom and dad said so? How do you feel about that?
I think sometimes it's both.
It's certainly been both at our house. I'll give you a practical case in point that also kind of connects back to the previous talk or topic. One of the practical ways that we manage technology at our house is when we go on road trips, which hasn't been very often lately. But I remember when I was a boy, I had a Game Boy, and so that was early on. I don't know if anybody out there in hinterland knows what monocolor Game Boys are like. But I missed a section of some of our road trips when I was a boy because I was on the Game Boy, and I felt like crap after I'd had my head down for a while. I mean, I didn't feel well. And so now when we travel with our children, I've explained to them sometimes, you're not going to be on a screen when the vehicle is in motion for any reason. We don't have a DVD player in any vehicle that we've ever owned. We'll sometimes watch a video or something in the parking lot when we're waiting at the store. Moving starts, the screens all disappear, and that is not a question. And we have talked about it many times. Why? And then other times, there's no need to explain it again because we know. And we have occasionally made an exception and then reflect it out loud with the kids. So how do you feel now? What did you miss that we could have experienced or talked or seen? Sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's just Saskatchewan grass, which, hey, that's fine. But yes and yes, we talk and sometimes we don't.
And I think it often comes back to how vibrant is your home life?
Yes.
Like when this COVID junk started way back in 2020, March, and everything got shut down, and right away I let the kids try Zoom conversations with their friends, and they were moody after because they saw what they wanted, and it wasn't that. They wanted real connection, right? And so our house is so loud. It is loud when you don't have screens on all the time, like terribly loud. And it is stupid messy. Our kids turned our entire living room into a fort this week, and they slept in it. So it was in my living room for 3 days. It was insanely messy, and I hate that. I want to relax in my living room. I don't want a big mess. But at the same time, my kids were creative. They weren't, living in that screen. And eventually, it starts to be their identity too. It's not just something that you're enforcing. Ava, our oldest, was it 2 years ago, she was at camp, and there were a couple girls that kept complaining that they wanted to go on their phones. And our little feisty Ava, she told them, well, why don't you just have fun and do something else instead? I'm like, careful, kid, you're gonna get beaten up. But she gets it, right? It's not just you have to not use screens. It's no, there's a huge amount of fun and creativity and life that I can have if I'm not living in this little box.
Right.
Yeah.
Which used to be the norm.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
And like nowadays, you buy tools. When I was young, we made tools. We made it ourselves, and there was a lot of fun and pride in making a round wheel for a little wagon. It was actually round. It could turn. I remember those days, and you were creative, and we didn't have fancy tools either. We didn't have routers and that kind of thing. We had a big handsaw, and maybe something to make them round, a little bit rounder, but you had to be creative, and so there's a lot of value. And even when you get older, I remember this a few years ago. I was in Bolivia, and I was with a guy whose car broke down, and there was an aluminum part that was eroded and it broke off. And so I asked him, "Is there a garage here that can fix it?" And he said, "Probably." And I said, "So how long will that take?" Well, I said, "I'll just fix it myself." And I said, "Do you have tools?" "Well, I have a lathe and I have a few other things." And I just realized he had a creative mind that I didn't. And an hour later, I came to the local store, and here he was sitting in the plumbing department, looking all over the wall to see if he has any part that could fit. And sure enough, he saw a part that could fit, and it was a plumbing part in a car. So he took that home and he hammered it in, and he said, "It's a little bit tight," but he filed it a little bit. "It's a little bit tight, but I think it's going to work." So that evening, he came to the service and he fixed the car. We would have hauled it to Winnipeg and had it there for a week. And I just realized there is a mindset that is different when you have to be creative. And so my question is, what are some mindsets or trends in our day that we have to take note of, or that are dangerous for spiritual life or family or development of character? Do you see any mindsets or trends that you have in mind?
I think filling every single second of our kids' day. I think boredom is one of the greatest gifts we can give our kids. If it wasn't for the sake that I had nothing planned that day, they would have never built the fort, right?
That's true. That's true.
And I heard a quote a while ago, and maybe if you take this to the furthest extent, it's not true, but that lazy parents make productive adults. That your kids, if you don't do everything for them, right? So, right now, because of the COVID shutdown, our kids can't go to sports, they can't do dance, they can't do all of this stuff. But the way we've raised our kids, we haven't had our kids and stuff really at all, which sounds crazy for homeschooling parents. But I don't want my kids to have something organized 24/7.
Yes.
Because I want them to have time and space to be able to be creative.
Right.
Sometimes, and it's not just screens, it's all that other stuff too. It's always having something prescribed to do for every second of the day. They need time to just have nothing to do.
That's a very good point.
And even for ourselves, like, I mean, I'm a mom, I can constantly fill myself with stuff I have to do.
Right.
But to choose to have time where I can be creative, I have to choose it.
Right.
Especially because, I mean, my life is very busy. But if we want to be creative, we have to choose to have time with nothing there.
So you're saying if you plan for the children, they don't have to think for themselves because you plan for them.
Exactly.
If you don't, then they have to think for themselves. Interesting point.
Yeah, and then as they get older, I also find that then you eventually have to maybe get them involved in like serving, volunteering, so that they don't become self-absorbed. Like, you know, everything goes around me, you know, the world just turns right here, and, you know, they feel entitled or whatever. So I feel like as my boys are getting older, getting them to work more, to do more things, they actually find that they have a purpose. They have a reason to get up in the morning. They have, you know, some money to earn or whatever. They just find more reason to live and to serve others.
Right.
Yeah, and the other thing is exactly, don't necessarily always make it easy for your kids. Let them struggle a little bit with something sometimes, because with that they will develop their character and creativity as well.
That was exactly what was going through my mind, Ben. I was thinking, we have made comfort the goal for the last generation or two, because life was very uncomfortable. We had a lot to improve on in the previous generations. But multiple of the discussion so far has been that comfort can be taken too far. And I've had times in my life where I thought of God's blessing as comfort. I had to unwind that, and I think it's pretty important. It's important to me now to show our children that what we want in life, what we want to build, what we want to reflect on at the end of the day or the end of the week or the end of the month, that has been really rewarding and enjoyable, has often not started comfortable. In fact, it was a decision to actually get really uncomfortable because the end goal.
And I think it's also something we as parents have to model. It's easy to become lazy, very easy. Going out, encouraging someone is hard. I have to get up. I think for us parents to model it, I think is very important. And last question, what can we do as parents, as families, to safeguard against some of the dangers that we're seeing? What positive influence in terms of spiritual or do we have for our kids? How do we build character? We've talked about it a little bit already, but I'm thinking if we want our children to be into the Word, we want them to be serving, we want them to be selfless, how do we do that? Are there any intentional things that we need to do to get them there? Any thoughts?
Well, I once heard from a good friend that she said that every time you feel or find that your kids feel a little entitled and lazy or whatever, she says, actually go sit in the living room, put your feet up, and tell them just to bring you stuff. A cup of water or a snack or like anything. And actually, they feel good because they have served you.
Right.
They actually feel good about themselves. And so I thought, why not? And I have tried it a few times, and they do like it. At the end, oh, what else can I do eventually, you know? Like it becomes, they feel loved, I think, when they do something for you.
Right.
Yeah, and I also think that it comes back to it again that we have to be the role model. If they see us in the Word and that we are in agreement and teaching them and showing them how important it is to us.
Right.
And kind of guiding and directing them as they're living their life, and also allowing them to make their mistakes under our roof, and letting them know that it's okay, they're safe there to do that. that we can guide them and direct them so that they can grow and build character properly in the home.
Right. Any closing thoughts, Carlos, Angie?
I'm not very, let's put it this way, I have higher goals yet in terms of how to set an example for our children. And I suspect that may stay that way for the rest of my life based on how I know myself. With that being said, I think what has stayed the most important to me over the years, in terms of if I want to have a chance at speaking into my children's life and not being that old man that's just trying to give them a fence to live within or a hallway to run down, is to connect with them deeply on their level, but not childish,
Right.
if that makes sense. And so we have said multiple times our house is noisy. Now, most of that's my fault sometimes. Like, I'm loud. It comes naturally, but I also do it on purpose because that connection with my kids to outplay them has given me so much grace that I would have spent and thrown away otherwise.
Well, I think that is a dad's job to be noisy. Because I know when the boys were growing up, it was time for bed or whatever, and Ben would be running down the hallway and doing all kinds of things, like getting them all excited. And then I'm like, well, who's bringing them to bed now? And I think you are. So yeah, I think it's a dad's job.
Well, and I think you do so well at it. Like Ava, our oldest, started doing lessons with horses lately. And I mean, I guess it's something you're interested in. But instead of just taking her to her lessons, Carlos is doing lessons with her. I think let's find more ways to do that kind of stuff.
Right.
When our kids are interested in something, don't just say, okay, go do it. No, let's do this stuff together.
Right.
Or if you're interested in something, then see if your kids want to come along. Like when we were going to get married, I told Carlos that I will not marry someone who golfs because I'm not going to be a golf widow. But the other day, I saw a dad who takes his little girl golfing every weekend. I'm like, you know what? If she enjoys it, that's a connecting time. Why not? No, I don't want you being a golfer still, but
Right.
But I'm just saying, like, whether it's what the kid wants to do or whether it's what you want to do, just bring your kids along. Like, there's such a mentality that the kids do their thing and we do our thing. We go on vacation and we choose a resort that has daycare the whole time. What's the point of going on a family vacation if you're separate the whole time? Really?
Right.
Who's raising your kids?
Right.
Some stranger again? No. You're the parent. Be the parent.
Right.
Yeah, when our kids were small, I felt like there was a lot of pressure on, like, oh, you have to spend time with the kids. You have to do this. You have to do that. And then I read a book, and the lady said, actually, all your kids need is a smile from you and work with them, like you were saying. Like, do things together, but it doesn't have to be like, oh, now I need to sit half an hour on the floor and play something. Like, it's doing that with them that really, really builds a relationship.
So in general, we see a depression rising exponentially. And I've often asked myself, what causes it? And I think a lack of purpose causes depression. And screen time has been proven, and it's in many studies now, it has been proven to be counterproductive. It's self-absorbing, your mind is not developing, and eventually they fall into depression. And I think being busy, creative, is a big safeguard against depression. And we see it now in kids, they're very young, that are dealing with this. I think a lack of purpose is a trap. It's a really dangerous trap. Well, thank you very much for sharing. I think we'll end with this. And bless you and your families. You have a lot of challenges ahead of you and have gone through many. And you're wise parents. I think you'll do a great job. So let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you for these couples that have been willing to share. I pray you would bless their families. I pray you would bless them with unity between the two of them as parents. Give them wisdom, give them creativity, a creative mind with their families. And I pray you would help them to keep the hearts of their children, to somehow be able to connect with them in a way where they keep the hearts of their children. And I pray you would bless them as they are encouragements to others, because the world is looking for answers. Everyone is looking for answers on how to be a blessing and how to live life in a productive manner and have a purpose in life. So Lord, I just pray that you would guide us in that we could all find purpose in life and teach our kids how to find purpose in life. Thank you, Lord, for this time. Pray it be a blessing to those who have been listening. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.